Hi, my name is Paul Arnold and I'm a qualified psychotherapist and I'm also a trained coach. And today's session is really about talking about helping you find the next stage of your career. Now, with all these are big topics and I'm just scratching the surface of it. And I'm going to share with you a bit of theory, some tips and strategies about how to cope with this stuff. And as always, these are more cognitive, more behavioral, and so often, sit more at the coaching end. And actually, there's a fantastically important role of psychotherapy because in that space, we're primarily dealing with the emotional content. Because very often we find that a lot of these issues have very powerful antecedents within an emotional trauma that happened much earlier on. So let's get going. I see it so often in the therapy room, people come in, quite senior executives, their mojo's gone, they're burnt out, they don't really know where they're going anymore, their career has gone a bit wonky, shall we say, hasn't quite lived up to the expectations or what they thought it was going to be. And for some of them, they've been let go, and it's about, well, what do I do now? Where do I go? What's this future life ahead of me going to be about? And I think it's really about helping people to rediscover their purpose and their meaning. Because, we look at the, existential, psychotherapy. One of the key things it puts at the very heart of it is having purpose and meaning in our life. And if we have that level of purpose and meaning in life, it really helps give us energy and resilience to push on through. And I think there's a recognition about sometimes in our lives those purposes change and we move to a different stage. As regards to the sort of tips I would give on this thing, is the first thing is be patient. Let's say, you are unsure, you are at a crossroads. Don't just jump to the very next thing, because very often we can go back to a place of safety when actually what we really need to do is have the courage to move to where we really, really want to go to. And so very often in a sort of a coaching space, I'll talk very much about ideas about, what would you do if you could not fail? Or if you won the lottery and by the time you've gone around the world, you bought the nice car, what would you then do if money wasn't the issue? And then we start to get to some really important, I'd really want to be doing X. And then we look at what I call the epitaph. I get them to write an epitaph, which is what do you want people to remember you for? And very often it's about a place of being rather than doing, And then I'll get them to investigate what part of their job were they most them? Did they most come alive? Because that helps give some evidence about, well, what is it that really fuels you? And I remember when I lost my job, I was going to meet someone and it was a cold, wet, miserable March day. And I remember thinking, of all these 6 things I could do, which is the one I would most want to do on a miserable day like today? It's not a bad judge. And then one of the other things I was going to look at the values, and I'll do a whole video about finding what our true values are. But what are our values? Because let's start living to our values in that space. Now, in the world of psychotherapy, we dig at a much deeper level into that. And we discover what is really important and why it's important and what is your true core essence of who you really are. And then obviously I can then bring my coaching skills in to really help develop the action plan to move you towards where you need to get to. Anyway, I hope that helped. Take care.